My name is Christopher Dillis. I've been a researcher at UC Berkeley for a little over a year now in the Cannabis Research Center, although I've been working with the CRC for a couple of years before that, focusing on cannabis water use and sort of other industry related research. Joining me today, we have Derek Smith from the Resource Innovation Institute, who'll be sharing some exciting updates from his recently published report on water use in the cannabis industry. We also have Elijah Portugal from CDFW, who is going to be sharing some of his expertise on the regulation of cannabis and its water use. And then finally, we have Earl Crosby from the Kirk Department of Natural Resources, who has a lot of great on the ground experience on this topic in Northern California. So what I would like to do is, for those of you in the audience who might not have tuned into one of these webinars or at least a water use presentation from us before, just to share a couple insights from some of the research we've done. There's a couple papers I've listed in the bottom corner that they're posted on the CRC website, along with a research brief, if you don't care to read the full versions of those papers. So the two take-home messages I would like to share are first, that in this discussion that we have about how much water does cannabis use, one of our first papers kind of set this dialogue of, well, it's about timing and it's about when water is actually withdrawn from the environment. So we found that the storage capacity of a farm and the sources they use actually influence when they take water from the environment, which is actually more important than just putting a number on how much water cannabis uses. And then the second finding is that wells are the most prominent source of irrigation water for cannabis in Northern California. And this sort of introduces this issue of groundwater surface water interaction and brings in a whole other field of geomorphology and hydrology, trying to get other researchers involved in studying how groundwater and surface water interact. However, okay, so since 2018 though, and most of this work has been focused in Northern California, and since 2018, this cannabis industry in California is developing statewide, and so this sort of necessitates a more broader research focus. And so I guess it was just a couple of weeks ago, we put out a paper on the geography of regulated cannabis in California since 2018. And this paper, by the way, is also now available on our website if you want to check that out under our publications tab. So this is one of the main summary figures, and I don't expect you to, and this is just for a preview. Don't worry about actually digesting any of this in the 20 seconds I'm going to show it to you. But this is just to say that what we've seen is, while Northern California is still home to the most farms, it's really along the Central Coast and in Lake County that we're seeing the largest expansion of cultivated acreage. And this is a result of much larger farms coming into the industry in these areas. And so what this means is there's clearly a new kind of cannabis farming in California. And so we're seeing larger farms in drier areas of the state. And part of this industrialization of cannabis results in the increasing diversity of irrigation practices throughout California. So this sort of brings more uncertainty even into the question of how much water does cannabis use. And so luckily, Derek's going to be able to share some great info on that with us in just a minute. But I also wanted to include this note here that we still see the largest number of farms and the most overlap with sensitive watersheds in Northern California. And so for good reason, this is still where we're focusing most of our research attention. So that being said, so looking statewide though, we're still seeing this trend in larger farms and in drier climates. And we found that this increases the likelihood of well use. And so a big part of the discussion around well use has been impacts to stream flow. And so some previous research that we've been involved with has identified that, wells as far as over a kilometer from streams still have the potential to impact flow, and that these impacts can be delayed and persistent. Delayed meaning they might not show up for a number of years, and persistent meaning they may persist. for a number of years after extraction from that well has ceased. But so finally, looking statewide, there's a lot of variation to the extent which these cannabis farms and their wells are located in groundwater basins. And so this issue of cannabis farming in groundwater basins brings another a question to these areas in which cannabis is a relatively new topic. And that is, again, how much water does cannabis use? And because policies are just in the early stages of being drafted and revised, this is a very important area, a very urgent need for new information on how cannabis farms are using water now, and sort of a more updated picture on water use practices, and just to get a handle on the diversity of water use practices, to have a base for which we can get an estimate for how much water cannabis uses. So with that, I think that's a pretty good segue to our first panelist.